Good evening, friends, and we are back with you.
This time we are going to discuss a very important book. Yeah, it is novel.
Yeah, it's a novel, world famous novel by Milan Kundera.
Milan Kundera. Many of you must be surprised. Perhaps you have heard this name for the first time.
Actually, he was nominated for the Nobel Prize,
Yes.
but many of us have not heard of him.
Yes. Basically, he writes in Czech language.
And now also in French, some of the novels he has written in French as well because he lives in France, basically from Czechoslovakia.
Right. And therefore, some of the political references of Czechoslovakia you would find in this novel. What is the name of this novel, Rajesh?
The Unbearable Lightness of Being.
The Unbearable Lightness of Being. When I heard this name for the some time, it took me for some time to come to terms that this is a title of a novel.
First of all, whether the being is light, our living is so light-hearted, is it lightness of being? And secondly, can it be unbearable also?
Yeah, this is really remarkable. He says even if you try to interpret life as light, something that is not heavy, right? Light in the sense,
Yeah.
something which is not heavy, but even lightness becomes unbearable.
And weight is unbearable, all of us know. The longer you carry the weight, the more unbearable it becomes.
What kind of weight we are talking about? Some of you must be surprised, some of you must be thinking that we are talking of the weight. Culture is weight, social norms are weight, ethical moral codes are weight, legal codes are weight, government is weight, all the laws are weight. Because when we live our life, we have to carry this load of culture, society, economic
History,
systems, history, philosophy,
politics.
science, everything basically puts some weight on our life in the sense that it curtails our freedom, it curtails our spontaneity basically.
Any of our action is not just an action. It is a reverberation across the halls of history, politics, sociology, law, and all those things, isn't it?
When we do something, it's not out of pure will or interest. We do something because it has to be done under that circumstances, under that situation, at that time, and we are always troubled by what is appropriate, what is inappropriate, what is desirable, what is undesirable.
Whether
And
we have the free will or not, that is the open philosophical and scientific question.
now, before we try to look at this novel, let me
And
share.
then, Vinodji, there
Yes.
is the weight of the past as well as weight of the future.
Exactly.
Whatever we are doing, what consequences it is going to have, do we know for certain, or even with the reasonable degree of probability, and whether we know or whether we care about them or not.
Once, Osho said that the true liberation arises when you disconnect yourself from the past and future and remain focused on the present moment.
Eternally in the present. Shuddha tatkal ke prani.
Right. Now, this novel is very interesting. Take it from me on the stem paper that this novel, when you read it, it is so interesting, it is so engaging that you want to go on reading. I tell you, Rajeshji, the last 220 pages I completed in the single day.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And this novel, some people, Vinodji, say it's a philosophical novel.
No, it is not
Well,
a philosophical novel in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
Although there are references to the philosophers. For
Definitely.
example, in the beginning itself, he is talking of the Nietzsche.
It's an eternal return of the Nietzsche and the consequent weight. Nietzsche says when something is repeated infinitum, endless number of times, it becomes heavy.
And at the very outset, Milan Kundera tells us that whatever happens in life, it has nothing to do with eternal return.
Yeah.
He makes a reference to some bloody war that took place in Africa in 14th century.
Yeah.
He says that if every event is to be understood in that philosophy of Nietzsche, eternal return,
Then
then
will
that
be-
war will keep on reoccurring, and entire world will be finished.
And it will be highly then significant event. But actually speaking, it is not. It is just an event 6 centuries ago, 8 centuries ago.
And this novel is really different from the traditional novels because although there is a story, but a story is not the central engagement of the novel.
I would
Although-
say rather than a historical novel, it's a poly novel, so to say.
There are historical, political references, but you cannot term it as a political
novel or a political novel or a philosophical novel. Or
although there are references to psychology, but it's not a psychological novel. And that is the beauty of this novel, that it draws upon the knowledge of psychology, political science, history, philosophy, and human nature, but it does not fit into any of these categories.
Any of the compartments it doesn't fit. It's like life. Life also, any action doesn't neatly fit into the compartment. Subjects are for the schools and colleges.
Multiple actions take place at multiple levels.
And then friends, don't be bogged down. By all these references, we don't mean that you have to know all these subjects to read this novel. No, not at all. Such a style Milan Kundera has cultivated, that he clarifies whatever he writes, he clarifies in the next sentence.
And interestingly enough, the language is so understandable.
Yeah, even in the translation.
So lucid and clear. And in one of his interviews, he said that this novel was not really well received in France because the French people care more for ideas.
And so here ideas are there, but they are, concretized into actions, and through action only he tries to convey those ideas, and not the fixed ideas. It's not that he says A, B is not the case. No, both can be the case.
Exactly. And the novel is written in the 7 chapters. And
usually
7 parts. Yeah. Usually Milan's novels always have 7 parts.
Like harmony, musical harmony.
Because he's a great person who understands the music as well. And now when we look at basically characters, the 4 characters are very important. They capture our attention.
Teresa, Thomas, then Sabina, and Franz.
Now their relationships are intricate basically. Yeah. Thomas is basically a surgeon in Prague, right? The capital of Czechoslovakia. And it is just years preceding the Soviet invasion in 1968.
68, Prague Spring they call it.
Yes.
And then the Soviet invasion happens.
And he's a person, right, who lives a life, quite carefree life, and he
came out of his first marriage and a baby because he thought it to be very heavy. He was not the person to be tied down by the matrimony.
And then he keeps mistresses, but usually he does not keep their relationship for a very long time.
The rule of 3, an interesting thing. Either you meet a girl 3 times in a row and then give her up, or then you cultivate the relationship but meet the person 3 weeks apart.
Yes. And all of a sudden then one woman, Teresa, walks into his life, right? And
he has met him at a hotel by chance,
and quite coincidentally basically she runs into his life, and then he realizes that this girl, Teresa, is not like other mistresses whom he can easily cast off, whom he easily can send away. But somehow, although unwillingly in the beginning, he begins to live life with her.
And he realizes that this relationship is different. It's not purely a sexual relationship, because he doesn't sleep with any of the women. He makes love too. But with Teresa, he rather likes sleeping in the bed whole night with her.
And here it is to be realized that the physical relationship is not all between man and woman. When the physical relationship is elevated to something else, and this can be emotional, this can be passion, this can be compassion, this can be imaginative understanding, only then a relationship acquires a new dimension, and only then it can be called love. Because when we look at Thomas-Teresa relationship, it is not simply a physical relationship and they stay together for a very long time. Rather, they stay together for the rest of the life.
Till the end,
Although the ups and downs come between, but they continue to be each other's friends, lovers, whatever you may call. And Thomas, apart from having a relationship with many mistresses,
around 200 he counts.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And if we talk of Indian actor Sanjay Dutt, right?
He crosses Thomas also, 308.
Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Perhaps it's very light for them to just indulge in sex without any baggage. No strings attached, what they call.
Yeah, that is something norm in Western societies, but even Eastern societies like India, perhaps it is really difficult. But still, the society is gradually opening up so far as the physical relationships are concerned. And Thomas has, one another attachment, and that is with Sabina, who is a painter.
Yeah.
And he goes there. Basically, she's a mistress.
She's his erotic friend, he calls.
Erotic friend.
Yeah.
But the relationship with Sabina is certainly qualitatively different
Different.
from his relationship with other women.
Yeah.
And really, Sabina is a very intellectual. She is a painter, and there are one of the interesting points of this novel is that he takes us to wonderful erotic descriptions
Definitely.
of these relationships. Right?
Definitely.
That is really beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful
yeah.
love
Artistic,
scenes are
very
there.
artistic love scenes.
And here we are reminded of D.H. Lawrence, who also depicts the man-woman relationship with the frankness and with the artistic touches.
And this Thomas, when he is after the woman for the millionth unique part, which every woman has, 9,99,999, they are the same, he says, but the 1 millionth part which is different and it is hidden, it comes out in the sex. So he is
Craves
after
for
that.
And he asks the question that all women are same basically.
Yeah.
They have the same bodies, that why I should crave for a new woman, another woman. He says it is 1 millionth part which is different, and that makes sense.
And that makes him the epic womanizer.
Yeah, epic womanizer. That he goes on, having relationship with one woman after another. And as against this, he said there are other people who are lyrical womanizer.
They search their own image in the woman they pursue, and for them all women are alike.
Right.
Because they search their own image.
They search their own image, that if they leave one woman and find another woman, the new woman will be exactly like the earlier one. Because ultimately they try to project their own image in the beloved. And then very important sentence comes that what is love? Love is a longing for the other half that you lost in the process.
Yeah, as per a Platonic myth, earlier the gender sexes were one into a whole. They were sundered apart by some deity, and after that both have been just searching for one another and magnetically being attracted towards
And
one
action
another.
of this novel takes place against the Russian
Russian
invasion of Czechoslovakia.
occupation of
And many intellectuals, as you know, that in the communist regimes they were dismissed, they were persecuted, they were harassed, and Thomas also becomes a victim of that. He is dismissed from his position as a surgeon and takes up job as a window cleaner.
And finally he leaves that job, also goes to the countryside with Teresa, because his relationship with Teresa is heavy. It is love in the real sense of the word. So he gives up everything. I mean, for the first job he gives up for his political opinions, when he compares the communists to Oedipus, who could not see their consequences of their things, and the lack of knowledge does not exonerate them.
And this Thomas-Teresa relationship is paralleled with another relationship that is between Sabina and France.
And here it is marked by the lightness, which is the hallmark of Sabina. She is in the relationship with France. It's a good relationship for 8 months. They make love and they enjoy each other. But one fine day, when Franz tells his wife that no, he is going to live with Sabina forever, she leaves him. Sabina is nowhere to be found.
Perhaps Sabina considers the living forever, that is a marriage, is heavy. And she's not interested, because she is a symbol of lightness of life. Everything has to be done in a lighter vein.
Even the death, she contemplates her death not to be buried under the grave which cannot be really opened. She wants to be buried under the grass.
And interestingly enough, Franz is so attached to Sabina, basically. He loves her, perhaps, right? And when she goes away from his life, he finds it very difficult to put up with this situation. And by chance, he's a professor and he comes in contact with another girl and she becomes his mistress, and he always refers to her as a girl with glasses.
But for him, the idea of Sabina, even the idea of the eternal march of history, is the compelling force. He goes to this country, Asian country, to take part in this
in a political demonstration for the liberation of Lebanon, because it was a time of Lebanon war as well.
Lebanon war, And while coming back, he's simply killed by the pickpockets.
Right. And at that time, his wife, although he has already left her, she comes and performs all the last rites.
And she interprets this at the middle age wanderings, the middle age crisis. And he went there to die simply. And this girl with glasses, she stole him away from me, like that she says.
Now, the central question that has to be debated, we all know.
And before that, Teresa, she is really in love with Thomas. For her, it is a very heavy sort of relationship, which she cannot cast away. Just she cannot be another body for Thomas. And when she learns of Thomas's endless womanizing, she tries to indulge herself as well, feeling light, but she can't really pull it off.
Right, because The moment you idealize any relationship,
Yeah.
it turns heavy.
And the dreams she has, even though Milan Kundera in one of his interviews has said that simply they are the dreams, but we don't think they are the simply dreams. They are her anxieties at being just another body.
Yeah,
for
they can
Thomas.
easily explain with reference to Freudian
Yeah.
psychology
Yeah.
that our dreams, in our dreams, we are face to face with our anxieties. Because the mechanism of the dreams, basically, the process of the dreams prepares our mind to handle anxiety in a better manner. That is a well established fact in psychology by this time.
And the central metaphor, as you were saying, is the lightness versus heaviness.
Now, writer does not pass any judgment
Yeah.
because on the one hand he shows the relationship between Thomas and Teresa, which is characterized by heaviness, and on the other, Sabina and her relationship with anyone, right, including that of France, is the
And
symbol
even
of
with
lightness.
Thomas, she is in the relationship, erotic friend of Thomas also.
So she represents the lightness of
The
life.
bowler hat, she has the hat from her grandfather which she took. It begins to acquire a symbolic meaning for her, but then that simply disappears from the novel and it's not nowhere to be found. That signifies the lightness then.
Now the question is whether one should live life as a heavy burden or one should acquire that lightness, one should live as it comes the way. No, there is no clear-cut answer to this, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps we know that the heaviness is unbearable. Many of us
Have
have
to
to
sacrifice
sacrifice
down by the heaviness, have to sacrifice many of our freedoms.
freedoms, pleasure, happiness. For what? For the
Maybe the
burden of the
social
society.
social norms, political norms, or the historical necessities,
Moral codes, ethical
moral
codes.
And to quote Nietzsche, when the things are repeated, suppose reincarnation, we here in Eastern philosophies, religions, we believe about reincarnation. So that is also heaviness of a kind.
Let me share with our Western listeners that we both brothers, Dr. Vinod Asudani and Rajesh Asudani, we come from Nagpur, India.
So we have the knack of Eastern religions and philosophies also, apart from learning about the Western philosophies. And we ourselves, we are rationalists and humanists, and we are not committed to any religious or philosophical system for that matter.
Now, Milan Kundera perhaps tells us that even lightness, when you try to live, with lightness like that of Sabina, still it in the end turns out to be unbearable. Because if you are light, if you are not anchored anywhere, if simply you are floating in the air, you will not reach anywhere. So in order to reach somewhere, you need to start from some point. You need to follow a particular path. Now what this path can be, it can be different paths for the different people.
Yeah.
So that is perhaps the underlying message, of course.
But at the same time, one should not be bogged down by the endless weight of all the things.
Because if you look at, if Thomas and Teresa, they lived the life with all the burdens of the life, and in the end, they are also crushed under the truck.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, France, right, or Sabina, they live life with lightness, but France dies perhaps unnoticed death,
Yeah.
a death that came unexpected to him, as many other things do come in our life unexpected. So nothing can be said, but the interest of the novel is that the poet, the writer, rather the novelist, has been able to portray life with all its colors. That is the beauty of this novel.
Definitely. And when one other aspect he has hinted at it, suppose we have the endless repetitions, endless iterations of the things. Perhaps we can be mature, we can learn from our past mistakes, as Nietzsche says, but unfortunately it is not the case. We don't have many lives to compare.
Exactly.
Ourselves.
So whatever we are living in this life, we are living for the first time. The life is not going to give us a second chance to taste or retest it. We cannot go back and say that we will live life again in this manner now or in that manner now. That's not possible. Now, in a lighter vein, this novelist has brought in many interesting things.
Yeah.
Many interesting things. For example, one of the ideas that he discusses is idea of kitsch.
Where no negativity is tolerated, it is expelled from the portrayed reality.
Right. So kitsch is some idea, some being, something that is not admitted into a particular universe. For example, if we talk of capitalist philosophy, in the capitalist ideology, communism
is totally outcast.
Yes, it is a kitsch.
Yeah, it's a kitsch.
And in communism, religion is a kitsch.
And simple example of day-to-day life, we outcast, we debar the shit, mention of the toilet from our life. Right from childhood, we are taught to despise it as if it doesn't exist. But the fact is that it exists. And when he talks about the suicide of the son of the Stalin, very interesting chapter, Vinodji.
Yes, yes.
When the two poles of the life come together, the outcast, outlawed, as well as the sublime, then explosion is bound to happen. One cannot then survive. So lightness and weight are such two poles, perhaps. You cannot really have either of them very strongly. You have to carve out a middle path as envisaged by Buddha.
Coming back to the idea of kitsch once again, that in our personal life or in a particular group of which we are a part, every group, every community has something like kitsch. Something is not admitted into that group.
So in this way, he has brought up many. And what do you make of the dog or that Karani?
At least in my opinion, frankly speaking, Rajeshji, that chapter does not seem to be quite well integrated.
Perhaps
with the
it is
other
brought
chapters.
in when he gifts that dog to Teresa. It is to take her attention off him because he is into perpetual womanizing and he perhaps doesn't appreciate the heaviness of love on her part. So maybe a sort of replacement, but then it doesn't succeed in that. Partly it succeeds, but in the last entire part, Vinodji, that is devoted. They go to the countryside with their dog and finally it dies. But the last scene is quite appealing to me. And both of them are at the bedside of that dog, but both of them are not together.
Yes, they said we hold the dog from each side, and we held our dog in our hands. But see, both were not passing through the same feeling, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe.
And if we try to justify this last chapter, perhaps it brings out wonderful love of people for animals, which is the need of our, right? We must love animals, we must love nature.
And they say that the time for animals is cyclical rather than linear. For us the time is linear, particularly for the Western concept of time is linear. Here Eastern philosophies conceptualize it as cyclical, birth after birth and so on and so forth. So by the cyclical time, perhaps he is referring to the Nietzsche's idea of eternal return, which endless iterations of the things can make us wiser, perhaps. But is it the case? We don't think.
We do not know.
No, we don't even know. As one of the saints put, when one Western researcher, Vinodji, visited India, he went to a saint and he asked, "Sir, it is said that reincarnation is there. You believe in reincarnation?" He said, "Yes, I not only believe, I know reincarnation is there, but we also have scoundrels like you. It doesn't make a difference."
Right. So that is really interesting. And before we come to the last, he also speaks of one concept, poetic memory.
Poetic memory. Oh, great. When a person, attaches himself or herself to you in a poetic memory. Otherwise, this person, Thomas, had sex with a lot of women, hundreds of women. But why Teresa? Stuck to his life, rather. She walked into him. She was the part of his poetic memory. When he was sensitive to her speech, touch, actions in a way which he was not for others.
When generally we speak it in the terms of true love. When you feel true love for somebody, he describes it to be a poetic memory. Because you are associated with that person, his or her looks, touch, smell, and everything that he or she does or says.
You are extra sensitive to that imprint. Like he gives one example when Thomas makes love to another of his women, and she remembers that there was storm outside all the while they were making love. He doesn't remember it at all.
Yes.
So he says she was not into my poetic memory.
Yeah. So that is really interesting, because this novel has to be admired, right? For these wonderful things that the writer says from time to time.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a unified story or something which you will find in this novel. You can read it from any point to any point. You are bound to enjoy it.
Right. So we hope that the sufficient interest has been generated in you to read Milan Kundera, and especially this wonderful novel, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. So thank you friends for listening to this wonderful discussion and for giving your comments for our channel. We'll be back very soon to discuss on some other important literary piece. Till then, enjoy life.